What's going on? Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm CJ Vogel, joined today by Gerry Hamilton. Hey, we're getting close to the start of the conversation of the offseason when we're looking ahead to the field in the fall when it comes to Texas joining the SEC, Gerry. We get an idea of where they're standing right now early on in the way too early look ahead. It won't be too long before you start throwing out the top 25 predictions, what's going on with where Texas is sitting and everything that goes into that. But today we're going to be talking about the preseason odds. We're in the spring session right now. Texas is on the field again this week for practices 7, 8, and 9. The spring game, April 20th. We'll start to get a clear idea of what kind of team Texas can be going into the fall, as well as what kind of noise they'll be able to make in their first year in the SEC, Gerry. And I wanted to ask you, just getting off the bat, because we will talk about Texas's odds to win the SEC, to make the college football playoff, and then to eventually win it all, perhaps. So I wanted to ask you, almost midway through spring practice right now, we've talked about the makeup of this team and the way that this team can, certainly make noise. And we saw them last year make the college football playoff, but, through 6, 7 practices so far, is the makeup of this team one that you think can make a lot of noise nationally and especially make a strong impact in their first year in the SEC?
Yeah, I do, because one third-year starting quarterback, quality backup behind them in Arch. So Quinn Ewers, third year starting quarterback, arguably the Heisman favorite, right? And that'll have to play out. But an offensive line, very experienced. Outside of Cam Williams, who does have years of experience in the program, this will be his first year as an starting with experience, but so much experience on the offensive line. That depth has been built really well in the offensive front. I think Texas continues to recruit speed and elevate the speed in the program throughout the portal and high school recruiting. I think it's a really good running back room of guys that are going to get older, right? Center backs will make a big jump from year 1 to year 2. Just look at other running backs around the country. And Jaden Blue will make another jump this year as a full-time piece to the puzzle. And then defensively, I think the edge position is going to take such a big step up. But all the experience, and Steve Sarkisian said it in his press conference, said we're not getting enough credit for how much experience we have on the defensive line. And I think he's correct on that, right? There's some guys who have been in some battles. They have some guys that need to step up. Somebody will come out of the portal. But safety position is so much improved. I think the edge position's really improved. I think Texas has all the pieces. Bert Auburn's back at kicker. We'll see what happens at punter. But they have – and here's the other thing. Here's another reason Texas can make a run. Because as daunting as a game week 2 is at Michigan, if you go up there and win that game, the table's been set for you, just like it was last year with Alabama. So Texas has an opportunity to set the table early in the season with a very experienced team that should be able to handle expectations coming off of last year, still having something to prove.
I think that's what's going to be very interesting, coming into this year, especially that week 2 game. Texas made that jump from 8-5 to 11-1, and then eventually into the college football playoff. The marquee win against Alabama on the road, as you said, set the tone. And I think after that, you saw a lot of these lines for Texas to win the conference, to make the playoff, to maybe even win it all. I mean, they dropped like a rock. And so I think, the interesting part of it now, and especially for those who dabble in this kind of stuff, is, when does the value really start coming into play whenever you're talking about this Texas football team? I did want to ask you, because we've touched on the positives here, I guess the headlines in which puts Texas in these conversations, the quarterback, the offensive line, the improved, secondary as well. What's the hesitancy? What's keeping Texas, or what will keep Texas from winning the SEC, from making the college football playoff? Even larger than that, is there a worst case scenario for Texas that kind of derails the season that we're not foreseeing at the moment?
I think the only thing that could derail Texas season is a rash of injuries. I think the program is headed in such a good direction. The talent levels increase so much. There's depth across the board at positions. Doesn't mean everybody's an NFL draft pick, but there's depth at the University of Texas right now. So I think it would take a rash of injuries for that to happen. But look, I mean, I just – if there's always areas of concern, right? You'd like to get another experienced adult in the room that's a draft pick level player at D tackle, play over the ball, right? Then, you got to get quarterbacks to the ground, and you got to get hits on quarterbacks, and you got to get quarterbacks to the ground. more moving forward in the SEC because the athletes are better. Everything's going up a notch. The offensive linemen are better athletes as a whole. That doesn't mean there's not good players at Oklahoma. TCU had occasional guys. A couple other programs had occasional guys, but as a whole, as a conference, there's more pressure on you to get pressure on the quarterback and not just get pressure, but get hits, get that guy to the ground, put teams behind the chains a little bit more. That is the progress for Texas defensively, because that also helps cover for your secondary. Asking those guys to cover longer for longer instances in the SEC, it's not going to be winning business. The athletes are too good in the SEC. So those are kind of the areas I'm looking at. But I think outside of rash injuries, Texas is ready to compete once again.
And I think it should be another exciting year. Before we get into the odds for the SEC, the playoff, and the national championship, Jerry, do you mind telling us about today's sponsor of Talking Ball as we move into, kind of the heart of this video?
Yeah, John Donovan, president of Longhorn Wealth Management Group. While today may be April 1st, don't be fooled by some fast-talking investment or insurance salesperson regarding your financial future. Instead, let John Donovan, who's a certified financial planner, do for you what he's been doing for Longhorn alumni, employees, family, and friends for over 30 years, adhering to his fiduciary responsibility to provide you the very best independent, non-proprietary investment, retirement, insurance, and estate planning services and solutions to ensure that your best interests are always put first in everything he and his team at Longhorn Wealth will do for you. John is not only a CFP, he's also a proud Texas Ex's Life member, and his wife and all of John's 6 siblings are also University of Texas graduates. John also served for over 15 years as a Texas Ex's board member, so he understands the passion, commitment, and pride of all UT family members, and he wants to bring that best of breed solutions and services to all his fellow Longhorns. So avoid the foolishness of working with a non-CFP advisor and get John Donovan and his team at Longhorn Wealth a call, 972-707-4900, or visit longhornwealth.net for your free 90-minute consultation with John on how to explore how he and his team can help you and your family achieve financial independence and security. Hook 'em. Thank you very much to John Donovan, president of Longhorn Wealth Management Group, for being the sole sponsor of Talking Ball.
Yeah, thank you, John Donovan. And again, hey, happy April Fools. I guess we forgot to mention that up at the top. But hey, to the point of this, we're going to be talking about the SEC odds to win the conference championship. Texas last year in its last season in the Big 12 came in as, I would say, the heavy favorite to win the conference, right around even money, which you rarely see, I think, is fair to say at times. In Power 5 conferences, I know Alabama and Georgia have kind of teetered around plus 150, plus 130 in years past. Michigan and Ohio State have certainly had their time, as is Clemson in the ACC. But when you're even money, even below even money coming into the season, that really gives you the indication that Vegas is looking at your team like, yeah, you're going to be a problem. Texas right now, plus 300 to win the SEC, the second lowest odds of any team in the conference in their first year. I think that's certainly something to keep an eye on. Georgia, of course, at plus 185. Ole Miss ahead of Alabama, who is tied with LSU. Jerry, I mean, what is standing out to you about these odds here?
I like Ole Miss being ahead of Alabama, and especially LSU and Alabama. Look, I mean, what stands out to me, Carson Beck, returning quarterback, Quinn Ewers, third-year starting quarterback, Jackson Dart, third-year starting quarterback, and Ole Miss is heavily invested in this, making this first 12-team playoff in the portal. They did great work in the transfer portal on the offensive line, defensive line. They positioned themselves well. Alabama, a bit of a wild card. Jalen Milroe, year 2 as a starter with a new head coach and coordinator in Kalen DeBoer. Kalen DeBoer will maximize Jalen Milroe, but the question is how much of that, what percentage of that playbook and scheme will Kalen DeBoer be able to put forth on the field this year in year 1, and year 1 working with Jalen Milroe. So that'll be very interesting to see. LSU, they have to rebuild the defense. I mean, they have some D-line issues. I think they have just some overall issues defensively. They have a lot new staff. Obviously, Bo Davis part of that. Corey Raymond, new D coordinator. They got some work to do there. Tennessee. Look, I mean, how Nico plays at quarterback is going to be key there. But Missouri at plus 1,500. Look, I'm not saying they're going to get in, but Brady Cook's back. Luther Burden's back. They got to replace defensive line. What are they going to look like on the defensive line? But I agree with how these odds are set right now. I really do. A&M has a lot of production back. 18th most production in college football is back this year. And it's almost like they're having an open tryout in the secondary out of the portal. But how well their offensive line plays is going to determine their season for me in year one under Mike Elko. You know they're going to play well defensively under Elko. But I agree with where these lines are set right now. I would have Georgia, Texas, Ole Miss top 3. Alabama 4. I'd have LSU below Bama and right above Tennessee. I maybe even LSU even with Tennessee for me.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight who Texas is going to be playing this year. Obviously, after their non-conference, their first game will be against Mississippi State. Yes. Not seeing a lot of love right now. You play Oklahoma, who at 40-1, a little surprising. And yeah. I think given Oklahoma's history previously, maybe some value if you're looking for that. But hey,
first-year starting quarterback, rebuilt offensive line. Look, they may have just lost their center in spring practice. We're waiting to see the returns on that knee injury, what the severity is there, to your point. But Oklahoma, that's a very young offensive line and quarterback as far as not youth on the offensive line, but youth playing together year one in the SEC.
Especially the inexperience, again, replacing all 5 offensive line starters from a year ago. And then Georgia, obviously the #1 team in the conference, as we expect, plus 185 shows that, Vegas is backing that idea as well. But then you go down to Vanderbilt right after that, Florida at 110-1, and Arkansas. So Texas is playing the 4 bottom teams in the entire conference when it comes to winning the conference.
And Kentucky, and they're playing 5 of the bottom 6. So when you first looked at this schedule, it looked daunting, right? But with Florida's struggles under Billy Napier, this 24 schedule looks a lot more doable for Texas. This is actually not a breathe easy, but a breathe easier first-year SEC schedule when you look at those odds and who Texas doesn't play. Great point, CJ.
Yeah, so that's certainly something I'll be keeping a close eye on because, again, first year in the SEC, you anticipate playing better teams year in and year out from what you saw in the Big 12. But, to almost the luxury of Texas, you kind of get a break in year one, which leads me to what Texas is hoping to get back to, and that's the college football playoff for year 2. Pretty good odds, favorable odds again for the Longhorns to return to the college football playoff. 3rd best odds that we've seen behind Georgia and Ohio State. So again, Vegas is favoring the Longhorns being a top 12 program this year, and again being in that national contention to return to the college football's biggest stage.
Yeah, so Texas, look, it's Georgia, it's Ohio State, it's Texas, it's Oregon. Those are kind of the 4 picks right now, and that means Georgia and Texas are battling for the SEC title odds, and Ohio State and Oregon are battling for the Big Ten odds. By the way, Ohio State plays at Oregon. Georgia plays at Texas this year. But yeah, look, I like where Texas is sitting here. I think that's fair. And what Vegas is telling us, CJ, and Texas fans out there, they think Texas is going to beat Michigan. Texas is a 2.5-point favorite over Michigan currently in Ann Arbor. Okay. And that over under, I think, is sitting around 49.5 right now. So, or that total. So look, Vegas is telling us they think Texas is going to beat Michigan. And after they beat Michigan, the tables are set to go to the college football playoff at that point. And we just went over the schedule, looking at the SEC schedule for Texas. And look, if Texas goes to Ann Arbor and they do the same thing they did last year when they went in to Tuscaloosa and beat Nick Saban in his final year at Alabama, if Texas goes in and wins at Michigan, the tables are fully set for a berth in the 12-team playoff. I mean, that's the bottom line for this Texas team. And I know a 9-3 team wouldn't have made the top 12 last year. I do think there's going to be a little wiggle room this year for a 9-3 team or 2 to get in from either the Big Ten or the SEC. But if Texas wins that game at Michigan, I think the tables couldn't be set any more perfectly for Texas to get into the college football playoff, barring a rash of injuries.
I'm with you 100%. Again, the way the schedule adds up, I know you go on the road to Michigan, the defending champs. I don't want to say wounded, but they've certainly lost a whole lot of pieces from a year ago, and it's not going to be the same team that we saw. New head coach, new quarterback, new offensive line, a lot of pieces on the defense departing as well, not to mention Roman Wilson and Blake Corum, kind of your two biggest playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. So a lot of shakeup there. And as you said, it's going to lead into what you expect to be a pretty favorable record going into Oklahoma, and then going into the back half of your season after the Georgia game. You should be in contention once again to make the conference championship, and as a result of that, be in that spot to make the college football playoff, which, if you do that, Jerry, you get to play, or at least play for the hopes of making the national championship. Texas came up, as we said last week with David Benda's interview, press conference with the media, 12 inches short of playing for a national championship. If that's not motivation for you, I don't know what will be. But it is worth mentioning again, the odds in which Texas is looking at to make and win the college football playoff and the national championship.
And again, Texas is right now is favored in every game but one. That's Georgia in Austin, by the way. It tells you what Vegas thinks of Georgia this year. So, I mean, look, that's where we're at right now. Texas is currently favored. And here's the thing, too, that when we look at this, the spring portal opens from April 15th to April 30th. If you look at the teams, those top 5 teams, if you include Alabama in that, I don't think any of those programs are taking many hits in the portal. I think they actually could have additions in the portal that could only increase their odds. So it's not like we're about to see a mass exodus from any of these programs of players that are going to be impactful in a Texas run to a playoff. In a Georgia run to a playoff. We're past that. What's going to happen now is which of these teams can add another key piece or two to increase their odds.
Yeah, and I wanted to mention Texas, of course, having that chip of getting very close but not conquering the mountaintop. But Georgia, again, a team that was kind of expected to win its 3rd straight last year. I wanted to bring up their odds from 2023 around this time from FanDuel. They were plus 220 to win it all. So even lower favored odds last year than this year, even returning Carson Beck and some of the pieces on this roster right now. Is it their championship to lose, Jerry? I mean, how, I don't know. It's a long season, obviously, a lot of variables, but Georgia, again, looking very talented.
Yeah, I mean, look, they almost had to hit a little bit of a reset button last year. I talked with somebody very close tied into that program, and they told me mid-season they didn't think they were going to win the national title. They thought there were too many guys on cruise control on that team, too many guys expecting it to happen instead of kind of the processing of why it's happened. And I think all programs battle that when they reach the mountaintop. So I think this was almost a reset button for Georgia, and probably came at it would have been great to three-peat, don't get me wrong, but it might be good, even though you lost one game, that's your reset for Kirby Smart. And gets everybody's mindset, everybody headed in the right direction once again at Georgia. And I do think, look, they have 4 offensive line starters back from the team that, I mean, obviously dismantled a helpless FSU team, but they have a lot of pieces back. I mean, they've had good portal additions. They have your quarterback returning. I think Oscar Delp's a future NFL draft pick at tight end. I expect them to get the quarterback to the ground more this year. Which they did fall off last year defensively there, even though they were tremendous defense. Mikael Williams, some of those guys going into their NFL draft year, I think they have the pieces, and there's a reason they're the favorite. I mean, look, how many coaches have won multiple national championships in college football now? I mean, for one, and then think about how talented this roster is. Number one recruiting class again last year. And a lot of those guys are early enrollees. So I think Georgia's the favorite for a reason, but I'll say this. They actually have, look, I know that game's in Atlanta, but playing Clemson right off the bat to start the season, that game can alter your season. So it's imperative that obviously that Georgia, not that they couldn't lose and make the playoff, right? But if they lost that game, that would be a kind of a hit for that program, I think, and that team next year, because the expectations are they're the #1 team in the country. So that opening game is huge for Kirby Smart, because the one thing you don't want to do in their position is have any hint of doubt in that locker room with that 1 through 85. Man, we aren't as good as we have been.
Yep.
If players start believing that just a little bit, then you lose the king of the mountain.
Which is, to Kirby Smart's credit, something he's very good at is finding ways to motivate his team. Remember 2 years ago when they lifted their second consecutive national championship, their best players got on the mics right afterward and said, no one believed in us all year. Well, you went pole to pole as the #1 team in the country and did it again. So credit to Kirby Smart. That is something that he's very good at when it comes to motivating behind the scenes. Jerry, I've got one last question for you. But before we get there, do you mind telling us one more time about Longhorn Wealth and John Donovan?
Yeah, John Donovan, the sole sponsor of Talking Ball. That's the president of the Longhorn Wealth Management Group and a University of Texas proud alumni. While today may be April 1st, don't be fooled by some fast-talking investment or insurance salesperson regarding your financial future. Instead, let John Donovan, who's a certified financial planner, do what he's been doing for Longhorn alumni, employees, family, and friends for over 30 years. Adhering to his fiduciary responsibility to provide you the very best in independent investment, retirement, insurance, and estate planning services and solutions to ensure that your best interests are always put first in everything he and his team at Longhorn Wealth will do for you. John is not only a CFP, he's a proud Texas Exes Life member, and his wife and all 6 of John's siblings are also University of Texas graduates. John has also served 15 years as a Texas Exes board member, so he understands the passion, commitment, and pride of all UT family members, and he wants to bring you the best of breed of solutions and services to all his fellow Longhorns. So to avoid the foolishness of working with a non-CFP advisor, and give John Donovan and his team at Longhorn Wealth a call at 972-707-4900 or visit longhornwealth.net for your free 90-minute consultation with John to explore how he and his team can help you and your family achieve true financial independence and security. And John has one last message for you guys. Hook 'em.
Well, perfect. Thank you, Jerry. And thank you, John Donovan, again, for sponsoring this week's Talking Ball. Jerry, we've talked about the team accolades, the conference championship, making the college football playoff, winning it all. How about one question about the Heisman, the sport's most illustrious award going to the best player in college football? Quinn Ewers, again, receiving some favorable odds here, tied with Carson Beck as the Heisman favorite as we record this on April 1st. This is not an April Fool's joke. Texas is once again atop of the preseason Heisman odds. It's been a long time since you could say that, but, I mean, pretty favorable odds here. What are your thoughts on the actual chances of Quinn winning the Heisman next year?
I think if he goes up and has a really good game against Michigan, he's going to be the runaway favorite early in the season. And that's not a slight on Carson Beck. I think Carson Beck's a tremendous player as well. The sleeper to me, and I think somebody's going to come out of nowhere. It couldn't be a Riley Leonard at Notre Dame. I mean, could it be Jalen Milroe under Kalen DeBoer, maximized as a passer and runner? There's Riley Leonard, which I think he's a sleeper.
I'll be betting that one right there. Give me Avery Johnson at Kansas State.
In a watered-down Big 12, it will be interesting. Jackson Arnold, I mean, I don't know, first-year starter. Cameron Ward at Miami.
What about these three?
Brady Cook has the weapons around him. I don't know defensively. DJ, I'm never going to be on that train. Give me a break. Cade, I'd have to. That one's not for me either. I'm looking around. Drew Allard, no, not at Penn State. So that's it. Shadur Sanders at 4,000. I mean, there's your sleeper. Cam Rising at 5,000 in the Big 12, obviously. So that's a pretty good look at it. Travis Hunter plus 6,500 is an interesting one. I mean, what if Colorado goes in and pulls off a 9-3 type of season in the Big 12 and he plays both ways? That's where your upset comes from in a year that there's not a heavy couple of guys. Like last year, it was all Caleb Williams. Is he going to repeat, right? Kind of like the NFL draft. He was said that's going to be the #1 pick. There's not that guy this year. So it's going to be very interesting. Brady Cook is interesting if Missouri has another good year. But I really do. I think Dylan Gabriel may have the best offense to go out and get it done at Oregon. and they have Ohio State at home, and they have a very favorable schedule to me at Oregon. So I could see him with the hype around the Oregon program, and Dan Lanning does a great job kind of maximizing that hype while keeping his team focused. Dylan Gabriel's in a really good spot at Oregon with that offense and how he fits into that and how quickly they get the ball out and how I think they're going to play him to his strength. So he's got a pretty good shot at this thing. I really believe, and he's the most experienced guy in college football returning.
Right.
But again, your sleeper is somebody like a Travis Hunter.
Well, I did want to point out one Longhorn again, CJ Baxter right here, receiving 100-1. Why is that significant to me? Well, if you scroll down a little bit further, you're getting the reigning Doak Walker Award winner.
Wow.
Much lower. So Vegas, again, looking at the Texas Longhorns as a team that will put up numbers. That offense should be scoring a lot. And CJ Baxter, a guy that they're, I guess, giving favorable odds to if you consider 100-1 as favorable. But here, again, Texas in contention to, make a lot of money when it comes to this value here for a lot of folks when it comes to the, I guess, the gambling side of things as all of this becomes more and more legalized. Jerry, I wanted to go to you one last time. Just one parting takeaway that you have from these odds, from these Heisman looks. What's standing out to you one last time?
I think the thing that stands out to me is it's one thing when we kind of have our thoughts on Texas, especially from the recruiting side. We know what the talent Texas is bringing into the program, right? We have a full understanding of, this is 3 straight top 5 classes, but it's also filled needs in those classes and what positions are ascending. Offensive line obviously is ascended. Edge position, I think, is ascending. Safety's position is ascending, right? In understanding of player development in the Texas program. So that from us that are kind of insulated and cover Texas on a day-to-day basis with the program, we understand that. But for Vegas to be that high on Texas out of the gate this year is something else. That's something totally different. That means there's a buy-in there and a research there that Texas is truly ascending to near the top of college football world again. And that means what? It means one thing. You are talented enough in Austin once again to compete for an SEC crown, to compete to be in the college football playoff, to compete for a national championship, and to have a player picked to be the favorite right now to win the Heisman Trophy. And that says a lot about what Steve Sarkisian has done at Texas. And more than us, again, it says a national view of the perception of Texas has certainly changed in the last 2 years under Steve Sarkisian.
Yeah, on our side of things, it's certainly affirming to hear and see what Vegas has up as odds. It kind of echoes what we've been hearing out of Austin, what we've been seeing so far for spring practice. That's my biggest takeaway. Again, we're starting to see it backed up by folks that aren't necessarily in the Texas circle here. But that'll do it today for Talking Ball. I hope y'all enjoyed the odds and the look ahead to the fall. Again, spring football is taking precedent right now, but it's, all for what we expect to be or seeing on the field next fall is some pretty good football, I would say. So for Gerry Hamilton, I'm CJ Vogel. This was Talking Ball, and thank you for tuning in to On Texas Football. Welcome.